With our friend Bruce Reyes-Chow, and Bruce is the author of a new book called "But I Don't Think of You. I Don't See You as an Asian."
Mm-hmm.
Something many of us have struggled with. Quincy, you haven't. Hey, Bruce. Hey, Bruce.
Hey.
How are you, buddy?
Good.
Good. Nice to have you on the show today.
Hi, Bruce. I'm Victoria, the sidekick.
Hi, Victoria.
Bruce, congratulations on the book.
Well, thank you very much.
It's fantastic. But I Don't See You as an Asian, curating conversation about race.
That's the title.
Yes, Bruce. What? So tell us what kind of Asian you are.
Well, that's a good question. I'm wondering that every day.
Yeah.
Some would say a really good one. Others would say.
Is that how it goes? Are there different judgments and categories of Asian?
You know, one of the things that I talk about in the book is that while we need to have a kind of a general understanding of culture and race and people's experiences, we can't place those into such specific categories that we begin to box people in. And therein lies the difficulty living in life, where we want to know exactly who everybody is, but yet we can't. But yet we still need to have a sensitivity to what people have experienced, particular groups of all shades and colors and cultures. So, you know, the book is really trying to help people navigate the complexities of a question like that. You know, what does it even mean to be Asian, to be white, to be black, to be Latino, all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of an uncomfortable conversation in our society, isn't it? I mean, it
is.
Because there's a lot of people who feel like if you bring it up, if you talk about someone's racial circumstance or situation, that by definition is what makes you a racist, right? Like that you're seeing someone through the lens of race, and then other people are like, no, you have to see me through the lens of race. So answer that question for me. What are you supposed to do? Pay attention to race or not?
If it were easy, somebody else would have written a great book and it would have all worked out, but
Yeah.
it's not. You know, I fully acknowledge at the beginning of this, I'm diving right into those awkward moments when people say something and half the room has no idea what that means, and half the room either wants to leave, attack, or just feels really awkward and embarrassed for the person. And so, you know, those are really, I think, where the transformative relationships happen. So I'm inviting people just to say, let's talk about it. And I use the framework of things that have been said to me or to my friends recently, even, that just lift up these kinds of things. So it's not even, I'm not saying let's talk about racism. Like that's too big. But let's talk about when somebody asks me or says something to me in our first interactions about martial arts or Chinese food.
Oh.
Seriously, does that happen?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know,
hey,
like
Bruce,
2
where
minutes
can I
ago?
get some good? Where can I get some good Chinese
we're
food?
gonna get
around
some
here?
good Chinese food.
Can you
Well,
show me
you know,
some quick kung fu so that
Exactly. And I do a little joke like, if I could kind of punch your heart out from 1 inch like Bruce Lee did, I might.
So is that a great way to kind of approach it, through humor, when people say these kind of crazy things? I mean, what are some of the strategies you use?
Yeah, you know, I think it's going to be different for everyone. You know, some people are great academics and intellectual minds, and I think those folks are really important to help us stretch in that realm. There are others that are kind of activist types and really need to push us on remembering the injustice that happens in a way that can be fairly aggressive, and I think in often ways healthy anger and righteous indignation. And then there are those of us that kind of sit in the middle, and that's where I am. And I think that means that there are going to be people that think I'm not hard enough, and then there are people that think I'm too hard. And I think humor and compassion and grace and all of those things have to be part of any time we sit together and we talk about race. Because when it happens in a vacuum, we bring so much in there that isn't based on, I see you as a human being. Not only as that, but as a person that laughs and cries and messes up and all of that. So I try to model that in the book, as well as encourage that in my interactions with folks around the conversation of race.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce, I think you do a little bit of thinking about this, and I do it, but it can feel sort of, you know, social science nerdy to ask what I'm about to ask. But are we really talking about race, or are we really talking about culture?
Yeah, one of the way the book is structured is I take 20 plus sentences, things that people say, and one of them is, well, race is just a social construct.
Mm-hmm.
And I use a story of a young person who I met, and we were at a conference, and we were sitting in a circle, and they had brought all the kind of the young people of color into a room. It was a fairly white conference, and so they wanted to make sure folks were doing okay. And we went around the room and we talked about, who are you, what's your name, and what's your ethnic background. And we got all the way. This guy is clearly an Asian, and he got to himself and he said, "I'm white."
Interesting.
And and my inside voice is, but you're not, right? I mean, but it was a reality of, is it just a social construct? And I think it depends, right? I mean, I think in some contexts, you build up this cultural identity that can be identified with X.
Yeah.
But then, he goes to college, goes to a school in the South, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, I'm not white. I'm culturally this, and so yes and no.
Yeah, because it does seem like there's a complexity, right? Like Quincy, our intern, who's here, is Korean. Quincy, is it all right if I talk about you in this way? All right. But her parents, her adoptive parents in the United States, are of European descent, and would have been raised in and this is true for a lot of my friends, in addition to Quincy, are raised in an Anglo culture. But other people see them and respond to them, like Quincy in this case, or somebody else, or you, Bruce, as Asian, right? So then their lived normative experience with the people in their family is one thing, but then their experience with new people in their lives is different than that, because people don't know. I've adopted in our family, my wife and I, we adopted two boys whose heritage is Mexican. And people will think that they speak Spanish. They don't speak any Spanish, right? So sometimes
you failed them, Doug.
Yeah, we've been pushing for decent English.
That adoption packet.
Yeah, and so their experience is not Latino or Hispanic at all, but people see them as Hispanic. So they have these two experiences, right? Like the experience of their own internal family, and then the experience of the outsider and the stranger. Is that something? I mean, am I noticing something that the people deal with?
I think you're right, and I think how that person who comes out of that particular context of, especially an adoption experience, are gonna react to that in many different ways. Some want to dive deeper into what does it mean, okay, to be a Korean American or a Mexican American now, and what is that all about?
Yeah.
Because that's the world in which others will probably just not want to have anything to do with that part of how people perceive them. And again, I try to bring up a lot of different kind of things. One of the other chapters is talking about, is there a good kind of Asian person, or a black person. And I use some of you follow football, RG3, there was a African-American commentator that challenged Griffin, he's a quarterback for the Washington Redskins, his blackness. And that's an internal conversation that many people have, that I can imagine that folks who come out of an adopted experience that might be white walk into another community, and all the Asians around them are saying, hey, wait a minute, you're not acting Asian. Well, is there a way to act Asian? Well, no. Are there elements that some Asians might have more than others? Sure. I mean, it's really complex. Again, the book is not answering any questions at all. It's really inviting people into actually talking about this stuff.
Yeah, and you say in the beginning of the book that you wondered a bit about not only the title but the subtitle, which both of which I like, by the way. I think they're great picks. I think the title of "But I Don't See You as an Asian" is catchy. But that subtitle is as well, the subtitle being curating conversation about race, is really different than, giving tips or providing help or doing these other things. When it comes to the category of Asian, when I was a kid, my mom used to refer to what we would now call Asians as Orientals, right? Yes. Like, it's kind of quaint now, but she didn't mean anything by it. She just meant, well, those are people from the Orient, because I think people used to refer to what we now call Asia as the Orient, right?
Right.
What role does that kind of language play in this, and how careful should people be about that?
Well, again, I think depending on the individual, folks will come at it in many different ways. I'm not one that hears that and immediately, my personality isn't particularly aggressive. Now, there are some who that will just set off many things and the way they react. Others don't worry about it at all and just kind of pass it on. I think if the relationship is right, that's a kind of we don't really refer that way. I mean, I think you have to gauge the interest or the relationship at a certain level, and I think folks have to decide once called on something,
Interesting.
does that change behavior the next time?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
and part of what this is about is how all of us have hybridity in our identities, whether we see it or not. And certain cultures that dominate, it's easier to see the hybridity or the mixture or the complexity, whereas other cultures that are not as dominant and that's changes in different places are more often seen as flat or one-dimensional, right? This word Asian is totally flattening a huge portion of the globe or a huge kind of culture. And that part of what I would hope we would want all of us to have happen in our conversations is to recognize within all of us and all cultures our own hybridity and try to reflect that complexity. And so like in Edward Said's book, Orientalism, he's looking at the ways oftentimes people in marginalized cultures, whether in Asia or other parts of the world, are represented too much in a one-dimensional fashion or in a stereotypified fashion, rather than embracing the fact that all of us are really, really complex and none of us represent one group in a complete kind of way. Right. That it's a hodgepodge. It's a very any culture or any race, anything. It's a really heterogeneous group.
Yeah, I think that's right on, and then it shifts depending on the level of the conversation. So if you in terms of politics, for instance, in the Asian American community, I know many of my friends. There's always the debate: do you divide up into the Filipino American Democrats Club, the Korean American Democrats Club, and the other, or does it make more? Does it have more social capital to be the Asian American group? And I think part of it is just being able to just walk in multiple worlds and to be okay with that and to navigate those worlds well. When we talk about privilege, right? Male, white, whatever we want to talk about in these grand kind of large pictures, I think it's important to do that, and not to also then say, oh, but you can't talk about big things because we're so specific. But at the same time, we can't talk about these big things as if every specific person owns every single element of them. I mean, if it were easy, we'd be doing it.
So tell me, Bruce, you come from a heritage that's Filipino and Chinese.
Correct.
Is that right? Were you born in the United States?
I was. I'm considered third generation, and there's all different, sociologists will debate what the generational reality is. But I come out of the educational tradition that third generation means that my grandparents came to the United States. So both of my grandparents, Filipino and Chinese side, came to the United States in the 40s. My Chinese side came here under what they call the Paper Sun from China, where he came under a false identity and lived under a false name for many, many years.
Oh, really?
Until he was offered amnesty. The United States government offered amnesty in the late 60s or early 60s, and many Chinese Americans took that. So many didn't. My family were Fongs actually for many years, and then became Chows when amnesty was offered by the government.
Well, on a side note, is that where your hyphenated name comes from, or is that from marrying your wife?
Yes, it's not from marriage. So everybody's always looking for the other Reyes-Chow.
Yes, as am I.
There is no other Reyes-Chow.
And my wife didn't take my name either, so she can live in total anonymity. It's it's wonderful for her extrovertedness.
So you can okay. So this is interesting because sidekick Victoria here is a hyphenated name, and her children carry the hyphenated names.
Yeah, so they're
did
like you.
I'm totally not on the question, but I don't see you as an Asian. On the question of I do
Yeah.
see you as a
I
hyphenated
don't
namer.
see you as a feminist hyphenator.
Well, exactly.
When you had to make a decision, like to name your children.
So here's the deal.
Yeah.
This will go in my next book. I'm going to write a book on parenting.
Okay.
But
Awesome.
so my wife and I decided when we got married, she was not going to hyphenate. She has a last name that isn't. She had dealt with a lot of teasing growing up in last name. Her last name is Pugh, P-U-G-H, and so she kind of kept it. Part of that is just stubbornness. Like I fought for this name. I put up with a lot of crap for this name. I'm going to keep it. And we also decided trying to hyphenate was not going to work. Reyes-Chow Pugh or
Yes.
just doesn't go well. And so we decided that if we had kids, girls would have her name and boys would have mine.
So how did that shake out?
So 3 girls later and no boys.
I love it.
Are all pews. How do they feel about it? Are they upset about that?
I had never been one of those guys that kind of wanted my lineage to live on. We didn't try for a boy. We, I love, raising girls. I think it's been a great blessing. So yeah.